Hi, I'm Andrew Connell, and I'm a Microsoft MVP in the area of Microsoft 365 development. And I have a lot of experience with SharePoint development, including all of the different development models that we've had, Microsoft Graph development, Microsoft Teams development, and developing add-ins for Microsoft Office, as well as working with Microsoft Identity, including Azure AD. Users can interact with your Microsoft Teams apps through buttons and forms in the Microsoft Teams client. Messaging extensions enable users to execute search queries or trigger actions in external systems. The results of these actions are sent from your custom web service to the Microsoft Teams client as embedded web pages or richly formatted cards. In this unit, you'll learn what messaging extensions are, what scenarios where they can be used, and the different types of messaging extensions available to developers. This unit will focus on one type of messaging extension, the action command. Action commands allow you to present your users with a modal pop-up called a task module in Teams to collect or display information and then process their interaction and send information back to Microsoft Teams. Let's start by looking at messaging extensions. Messaging extensions allow users to interact with your web service through buttons and forms in the Microsoft Teams client. They can search or initiate actions in an external system from the compose message area, the command box, or directly from a message. You can then send the results of that interaction back to the Microsoft Teams client, typically in the form of a richly formatted card. So what kind of scenarios do messaging extensions enable? One example is that the user needs to perform an action in an external system and have the results added to the conversation. For instance, when two employees are chatting about a customer issue, it can be helpful if the customer's history or issue details are added to the conversation timeline from data in an external bug tracking or CRM system. Another example is when you need to complete a complex task or one that involves multiple steps and share the results. For instance, consider a user that wants to request approval for a business trip. This involves finding a flight, hotel, and transportation options. After finding the wanted option, they need to submit an out-of-office and expense approval request to their manager. A messaging extension can be used to guide the user through a wizard experience to collect information and then use that to start the approval process and display a summary in the conversation. Messaging extensions are registered in your custom Microsoft Teams app manifest that specifies where the extension can be invoked from in the Microsoft Teams client. There are 3 locations that can invoke a messaging extension. They include a command box. This is the area at the top of the Microsoft Teams client. A compose message box. This is the area at the bottom of a one-on-one or group chat and in the bottom of the conversations tab in a channel. And a messages more actions menu. The more actions menu item is accessible from the ... menu when you hover over a message in a conversation. Messaging extensions are implemented as web services registered as a bot using the bot framework. When a messaging extension is invoked, Microsoft Teams will call your web service via the bot framework's messaging schema and secure communication protocol. While you can create the messaging extension web service by hand, you can also use the bot framework's SDK that simplifies implementing the protocol and expected message types sent from the bot framework. A messaging extension can have up to 10 different commands registered with it. Each command defines a type of messaging extension it supports and the locations within the Microsoft Teams client where it can be invoked from. When the messaging extension is invoked, Microsoft Teams will send, via the bot framework, an HTTPS message with the JSON payload that includes all relevant information. Your web service will respond with a JSON payload via the bot framework that informs the Microsoft Teams client what interaction to enable next. The Microsoft Teams client supports 2 types of messaging extensions: action commands and search commands. An action command allows you to present your users with a modal pop-up dialog to collect or display information. When the user submits the form, your web service can respond by inserting a message directly into the conversation or to insert a message into the compose message area, allowing the user to submit the message. Action commands can be triggered from the compose message area, the command box, or from a message. When invoked from a message, the initial JSON payload is sent to your web service will include the entire message it was invoked from. The modal pop-up triggered by the messaging extension is implemented as a task module in Microsoft Teams. Task modules when triggered from an action command messaging extension, can be implemented in one of three different ways. You can have an embedded web view, which is an HTML page that developers can control and complete, and then gives them complete control over the UI and the controls in the task module. You can use static parameters, which the messaging extension in the app manifest includes a static list of parameters that will be rendered in the task module, but developers have zero control over the formatting or the UI. And then the last option is an adaptive card. That simplifies implementing the UI, but it provides less control over the UI formatting options and the available controls. Now, to register an action command messaging extension, you're going to add it to the Compose Extensions array property in the Microsoft Teams app manifest. The type property specifies that this is an action command. The context property defines where the messaging extension can be invoked, and the fetch task property should be set to true when implementing the task module as an embedded web view or an adaptive card. Otherwise, you set it to false when you're using a static list of parameters. Now, after registering the messaging extension, you need to decide how the final message will be set. For example, will the final message be inserted into the compose message box, or should it respond directly to the conversation? Now, if you respond directly to the conversation, you're going to also need to register your messaging extension as a bot, because that's the only way it can write to the conversation. This option will allow you to update the response because the reply was initiated by the bot. Now, if you aren't using a static list of parameters to implement the task module, you're going to need to create and return the task module from your messaging extension's web service. The bot framework will send an activity object to your web service of type compose extension /fetch task with the command ID that you need to respond to with the task object. The following code demonstrates a messaging extension web service implemented using the bot framework SDK that responds when an action command is invoked. This example implements the task module using an adaptive card. The method handleTeams messaging extension fetch task is called by the bot framework SDK when a message of type compose extension fetch task is received. Now, when a user submits the messaging extension task module, the bot framework will send another activity object to your web service of type compose extension /submit action with the command ID and the parameters that you set. You have options or multiple options when receiving this message. You can have no response, where you don't respond with any feedback to the user, such as when the submission triggers a long-running action. You can use another task module or respond with another task module that can be used as part of a multi-step interaction. You can have a card response, which is going to respond with a card that the user can interact with or insert into the message, or an adaptive card from a bot, which is going to respond with a card that is added as a reply to a message, enabling a bot to update the message in the future. The following code demonstrates a messaging extension web service implemented using the bot framework SDK that responds with a card that is either added as a response to the message or added to the compose message box. The method handleTeams messaging extension submit action is called by the bot framework SDK when a message of type compose extension /submit action is received. In this demo, we're going to create an action command messaging extension for a custom Microsoft Teams app. Action commands allow you to present your users with a modal pop-up to collect or display information and then process their interaction and send information back to Microsoft Teams. Now, this demo is going to require a valid Azure subscription in order to create a bot using the bot framework. However, if you don't have an Azure subscription, you can use the legacy bot framework registration portal. You just want to refer to the documentation on how to do that. And there are links in the module and the lab module that's associated with this screencast that you can use to go through and to go about doing this. So what I've done is I've already gone ahead and I've created a bot in my Azure subscription. So let's take a look at what we've done here. So inside of this resource group that I have called Learn Teams, I have this My Teams bot. And so if I come over here to this bot, so I've already gone ahead and set this bot up, and there's a few things that I've set up that I've done with this. So first of all, the messaging endpoint, I have it set to a specific ngrok URL. So we're going to be using the tool called ngrok that will set up an HTTP proxy or a secure proxy back to my local machine, back to localhost. I have a paid account here, so I've got a subdomain that is well known that I use. But if you don't have a paid account with ngrok, it will dynamically generate a new subdomain for you every time you run it. Just know that when you do that, you're going to have to come back into your bot registration and change the endpoint so that your application knows what the subdomain is, where it's actually pointing to. So if I come over here and I look at these settings for my bot, what you can see, I've given it the name here of my team's bot 001. And if I scroll down a little bit here, you'll see that I have the messaging extension already set up. And so you can see here it's going to the ngrok.io/API/messages. Furthermore, another thing that I've done here is I've got a Microsoft App ID or app that's already been registered for this. So when you go to register your bot, it's going to ask you if you want to associate it with an existing app or with a new app. And in my case here, I went ahead and I've created an app. So I've defined my app. If I select manage right here, this will take me over to my Azure AD app, where I can look at the ID for my app. So it's this one that starts with an F332. And then I've also gone in and I've set up a secret for it that you see listed here. Now I've gone ahead and I've copied my secret out, and I'm going to use that later in the demonstration here within the project when I walk you through the project. But just want to show you where those were. If I go back over to my bot settings, so I've made a copy of the ID for my bot and the key. And then over on the channels, when you first create your bot, you only have the web chat channel set up. So the second channel that I created or that I enabled was Microsoft Teams. And I just set that up so that now my bot knows how to talk directly to Microsoft Teams. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I went ahead and I then created my Teams app. Now, I did that using the Yeoman generator for Microsoft Teams. And what that did is that asked me a bunch of questions, and it went ahead and it created my application. So if we come over here and I take a look at the package.json, there are a couple things that you'll notice here that have changed with this. So first of all, I want you to notice that we're using the bot builder v7.1, or sorry, 4.7.1. And I'm also using the Microsoft Teams SDK 1.6. So what you're seeing here is that this project is created to work with those versions or higher or later versions that are backwards compatible. There was a previous version of the bot framework that we were using that we could use in our applications, but it wasn't integrated with Microsoft Teams as cleanly as the one version 4.6 and 4.7 are in this case here. So things are just a little bit better, more cleaner integration. So let's take a look at the code here for our project. So if I come over here to the code and I look at the app/planetbot, what we're going to do is we're creating a bot that with this messaging extension that's going to show us details about the different planets in our solar system. So if I come over here to the planetbot.ts file, that's my TypeScript file, and I've got a bunch of stuff that I'm importing here from the bot builder SDK. But the part that I want to focus on here, if I scroll down a little bit, is if you look at this method here called handle Teams messaging extension fetch task. And so what this is going to do is that when a request is submitted from Microsoft Teams, this message or this handler is going to pick up on that request. And so what is this code doing for us? So what this code is going to be doing for us is that you can see here is that I'm loading this planets.json file. So this is a poor man's data set of all the different planets in our solar system. So all different planets, and we have like an ID, the name, a summary, orbit in Earth years, solar orbit, average distance in kilometers, how many satellites that it has. So like we have, in Earth we have one because we just have the moon. And then there's also details about more information for pages on Wikipedia, both for information about it and for picture links as well. Now, if you go back to our bot, so once we figure out based on this information right here, we're figuring out which planet we were looking for. In this case here, it's grabbing all planets. So we're sorting it based on their ID. So from closest to the sun, farther out. And then we're just going to get back return back a value property and a title. And the value is going to be the ID, and the title is going to be the name of the planet itself. Then I'm going to use adaptive cards. So adaptive cards, what I've got is this selector card. And what this is going to give me like a drop-down list where I want to be able to pick which planet I'm interested in showing. And so in this case here, we're going to take these sorted planets that you see right here, and I'm going to bind those sorted planets to this choice set that's inside of that selector card. So this card that you see right here is inside of this JSON file. And what it has here is we have this choice set for our planet selector. So I'm just populating all the different choices that we can use. And then I'm creating it as an adaptive card by using the card factory.adaptive card, passing in the source of the card, and then creating a messaging extension action response. So what that's going to do is have a task property, and the task property's type is going to be continue, and the value is going to be the card itself. And then it'll show it's a selector and then the size that I want it to be displayed in. And then I just resolve the promise, which for this method here was going to be returning a messaging extension action response. And I'm just going to be resolving that response. Now, once this first fetch is going to happen, the next thing I have is that when I select an option from that adaptive card, so if we go back and look at our adaptive card here on the selector card, notice here that I have this action.submit. So that's going to actually submit the card back to Microsoft Teams, which is going to send it to the bot framework, which will ultimately get to our web service. So if I look at the code for this, the next piece, the next method that we have is handle Teams messaging extensions submit action. And this method is going to be called, so again, we are implementing our Teams activity handler. This method is called when the submit action happens. And so what this one's going to do is it's going to look for the command ID. That is the planet expander action is the ID of the submit button that we had in our card. I'm going to go back and fetch all the planets, and I'm going to find the specific planet that was selected. And then I have a method farther down in my code that is going to get the details on the current planet. And so the way it does that is it loads a different adaptive card, and then it just walks, all of this stuff right here is just walking through the card and making edits to it, to the card. At the time of the recording, there's some preview technology that the adaptive card teams has released for templating. It's very promising, but because it's preview, we elected not to use it in this case. It would have been a much better solution than what we're doing right now. But again, we're going to just wait for it to be generally available before we add it to the module. So here we're getting our card, we're updating our card, and then we're just going to return the card back to the caller. And so that is what's happening in our submit action here. We have our adaptive card, and in this case here, we're going to return back a compose extension, and it's going to be of type result with a single adaptive card in the list. Now, how do we configure our project? Well, there's a couple of things we're going to need to do to configure our project. If I come over here and I look at the env file, this .env file, there's a couple of things that we've done. So first of all, I've specified the app ID and the app password for our Azure bot that we created using the app ID and password for the Azure AD application that was associated with our bot. I also set up my ngrok subdomain here as the one for my paid account. If you didn't use this, it would always give you a random one. And then my authorization token is also set, but I've set it as a system variable on my machine, so I don't have to disclose that. Now, the last step to using our messaging extension is I then have to register it inside of the app. So over here in my manifest.json file, couple things that I've done. First of all, the ID for my messaging extension is set to the ID on the of my Azure AD application that was created for my messaging extension. And then not only has that been set, but I've also, if I scroll down a little bit here, you will also see in the compose extensions, I have a single compose extension that's listed. So here I have a bot ID that's set up. So that compose extension is the ID of my Azure AD application. And then I've set one command in my for my messaging extension. His ID is Planet Expander. It's an action command, as we talked about a minute ago. It's not a query command or search. And the title of it is called Planet Expander, and that's the description. And I'm saying, where can it be used? It can be used in the compose message box, or it can be used to expand an existing message. And then finally, it's also a fetch task as well. So everything is now set up. So the next thing we have to do is we can go ahead and start up our project and go ahead and add it to Microsoft Teams. So I'm going to open up the command prompt, and I'm going to say gulp ngrok serve, and that will start up my web application. And we can also make sure that it actually is running by going to this link right here, and just to make sure it works. And okay, so our web application is definitely working. So good, we're in good shape. Now, let's go log into Microsoft Teams and add our messaging extension to Microsoft Teams. So I'm going to go to teams.microsoft.com. And we're going to go ahead and log in. So I'm going to log in with one of my demo accounts. We're going to log in as Megan. Into our Contoso organization. We'll say no. And let's load the web app. And let's go ahead and create a new team. And we'll just call this our messaging extension tester. All right, so now that that's done, now let's go ahead and let's install our app. And I'm going to scroll down and choose Upload a Custom App. And let's go find our app that we created. There it is, messaging extension. And there's our Planet messaging extension. So I'll go ahead and select that. And here we have our Planet messaging extension. We can see that we can insert content directly from the message. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll say add. And here we go. Now that our messaging extension has been set up, it is now going to go straight to our one-on-one chat. So here it's prompting us with that display card. And so here it's going to ask us what planets do I want to select from. So I'm going to go ahead and say, let's select the Mercury option, and I'll say insert a selected planet. Now this is going to call, right now it's calling our bot that's running on our local machine, because that's the one that returned this card. When I click insert selected planet, it's going to submit this request, this message, back to the Microsoft Teams, which will ultimately send it to the bot framework, which will come back to my web service, which is handled by that submit action method. And what that should do is that uses the message box, the compose message box, and it goes ahead and adds in our messaging extension directly to our message, where I can then just hit send, and there's the message. So this is using our adaptive card that we populated. The other way that I can do this too is I can end up saying, instead of popping it up like that, I can pop it up by selecting the icon for my messaging extension. Now I just use the default box here for this, but I just type this in. It only has one extension that's been set up. So here I can then just pick a different planet, insert that planet, and sure enough, we get a totally different planet that's showing up in our list. So first planet that we got was Mercury, and the second one that we got was Venus. Now, the other thing you can do is you can also expand or trigger this from this ... So if I come over here and I just add some message, You can see here that on the more actions, I can also trigger my Planet Expander, which does the exact same thing. So in this demo, you saw how to create an action command messaging extension for a Microsoft Teams app. In this unit, you'll learn how to execute a messaging extension search command from an existing message. The search commands allow your users to search an external system for information, either manually through a search box or by pasting a link to a monitored domain into the compose message area, and then insert the results of the search into the message. In the most basic search command flow, the initial invoke message will include the search string the user submitted. You'll respond with a list of cards and card previews. The Microsoft Teams client will render the card previews in a list for the end user to select from. And when the user selects the card, the full-size card will be inserted into the compose message area. To register a search command messaging extension, add it to the compose extensions array property in the Microsoft Teams app manifest. The type property specifies that this is a query command. The context property defines where the messaging extension can be invoked, and the parameters property defines the input fields displayed in the search experience when invoking the message extension is invoked. If you include the property initial run to true, your web service will receive the invoke message as soon as the search command is invoked. Otherwise, it'll only receive the message when the search is executed. This property defaults to false if you omit it. When your search action is invoked, the bot framework will send an activity object to your search web service of type compose extension/query with the command ID that you need to respond to with an object containing a compose extension object within 5 seconds of receiving the request. The method handle Teams messaging extension query is called by the bot framework SDK when a message of type compose extension query is received. The type property can be one of the following options. It can be a result, which displays a list of the search results, a message, which displays a plain text message, auth, which prompts the user to authenticate, and config, which prompts the user to set up the messaging extension for the first time. The attachment layout property can be either a list of results containing thumbnails, tiles, and text fields, or a grid of thumbnail images. Now, the attachments property is used when the type is set to the result and it contains an array of supported cards. If the type property is set to message, an additional property text can be used to set the plain text message that's displayed. And when the type property is set to auth or config, use the suggested actions property to suggest additional actions that you may want to perform. In this demo, you're going to see how to execute a messaging extension search command from an existing message. So again, this assumes that I'd already created the Microsoft Teams app project using the Yeoman generator that we saw in the first demo. And what we're going to do is I've taken that project and I made some changes to it to add some additional functionality. Now, this does not require any update to my Azure AD app or bot framework bot registration that I've previously set up. I'm going to use all the exact same settings there. So the first thing I need to do is I could code this first, or I could register the extension. So I'm going to register it first. So what I've done is if I go into the manifest.json, I went ahead and I incremented the version. And the reason why I incremented it from 001 to 002 is that in order to upgrade an existing installed app, I have to change the version number. So that's one reason why I did that. And then if I scroll down, let's look at the new compose extension. So we already had this extension right here for our action command, but I've added in a new one here for the query command. So what that one's going to do is that's going to execute a command called Planet Expander search. And it's a query, right? And it's available from the compose message. So notice here that there are some parameters that I can pass in. I've only specified one parameter called the search keyword. And the description of this says you can enter in the inner, outer, or the name of a planet. So the idea is show me all the planets in the solar system, or I only want to search for a specific one by name, or I want to see all the ones inside the asteroid belt or outside the asteroid belt. So let's go look at the code for this. So what I've done is on my bot that I've created here, we've already looked at this fetch task and we've already looked at this submit task. What we haven't looked at is this new method here that we have that we're overriding called the handle teams messaging extensions planet or query method. And so what I'm doing here is I'm going to first get the search query. So I'm going to first try to go fetch the search query that's being passed in. And I'm going to look at the parameters, and I'm looking for a parameter called search keyword. And I'm looking to make sure that that value, the value is actually provided. If it was provided, I grab the value, I cut off any white space, and I make it all lowercase. I go back to my little in-memory database of all my planets that we saw in the first demo. And here I'm going to go ahead and run my search query. So I'm first checking to see, was the query inner or outer? If it was inner, then grab all the planets that are inside or equal to planet number 4. Otherwise, which is, what is that, Mars? Or show me everything that's outside the asteroid belt, which is greater than Mars, farther out than Mars. Otherwise, I'm assuming that somebody specified a specific planet. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try and find that planet by name that was passed in and get a query results to that as well. So now I've got all a collection of planets that are coming back. And specifically, I'm getting just an array of all those different planets. Okay, so now the next thing we're going to do here is I'm going to go convert all of those planets that I got back. I'm going to convert all of them to cards. And so I have a new card that I've created here, or I've got this result card here. And if I look at the result card method, so we've already seen our detail, our result card is just using a hero card as the result. And so what that has is a name, a summary, and a picture for the hero picture for it. So I'm going to get all of my results, and I'm going to return that back as a result list and give that back as an array. So let's see how this works. So again, we're going to come back. We're going to build our project. So we'll do a gulp ngrok serve. This will spin our project back up. It'll build it, spin it up, and let's make sure it's running. There we go. So now we see our servers running. So let's go back to our Microsoft Teams client, and we'll go back to our app. So we'll go to More Apps, Built for Contoso, and Planet Messaging. We want to update it to use the new version, which is version from Demo 2. We'll use this version here. All right, and now if I go select it, we are now in version 2. So now what I should be able to do is if I go back over to my one-on-one chat with this, I should be able to select this, and now you can see that there's the description. So enter inner, outer, or the name of a specific planet. So I could say, for my initial thing, let's say inner, and just let that sit there. And what that will do is grab the first 4 planets in our solar system. And some images aren't rendering, that's okay. Now we'll try outer, and that should grab Jupiter and everybody out farther out than Jupiter. And if I select any of these, it'll add it as a display card because that's like a normal fetch that we were just doing previously. Or that was the what we defined for it. I can also specify a specific name like Saturn. And it did find that one specific one. So here what you've seen is how to create a messaging extension that is a query, a search command that's allowing me to search straight from the search box. In this unit, you'll learn how to add link unfurling to your Microsoft Teams app and how to implement this type of messaging extension. With link unfurling, your app can register to receive an invoked activity when URLs with a particular domain are pasted in the composed message box. The invoke will contain the full URL that was pasted into the composed message area, and you can respond with a card the user can unfurl, providing additional information or actions. This works similarly to a search command, with the URL serving as the search term. Adding link unfurling to messaging extensions follows a similar process as action and search commands. You'll first register the domains that are supported by your messaging extension and then implement the handler in your web service. The first step is to register your link unfurling messaging extension in your Microsoft Teams app manifest file, And you're going to do this by adding an entry to the message handlers property on the compose extensions property. The type property must be set to link, and the value property must contain a domains collection of domains that the link message handler watches for. If a link is added to the message that matches a domain that is listed in this collection, the message handler is going to be invoked. In addition to the message handlers property, all valid domains must be listed in the valid domains property of the Microsoft Teams app manifest. Now, when a valid domain is detected by the Microsoft Teams client, the bot framework will send an activity object to your web service of type compose extension / query link with the URL from the message. Your web service will respond with a similar response as the search command. However, if you return multiple attachments, only the first one in the collection will be used by the Microsoft Teams client. In this last demo, you're going to see how we can add link unfurling to your Microsoft Teams app to implement and how to implement this type of messaging extension. So this is a very simple type of extension, as we talked about a minute ago. All I'm going to do is I'm setting up support to watch for specific URLs or that matches a certain domain to be pasted into a message. And if it sees it, if Microsoft Teams sees that, I want it to send me the entire text of that message to my messaging extension and allow me to add something to the message. So for example, in our case, if someone pastes in the URL to a planet and that's listed on Wikipedia, then I want to be able to go ahead and add in my display card for that planet as part of that link. So let's see how I've done that. So what I had to do is in my manifest, again, we've updated the version number. And if I scroll down, we have a new message handler that's been added to our compose extensions. So we already have looked at this one and we already looked at this one. So in our compose extensions, we have, went too far with that command. There we go. We have a message handler, which is of type link. And it has a valid domains of Wikipedia. So the only other thing that I've done here is I specified Wikipedia as being a valid domain that can be used with my app. Now, in the code for this, if I come over here and look at my bot, we've already seen the fetch, we've already seen the submit action and the query action. You now have this other option here called link query. And it's very, very simple. Here's my list of planets, and I'm looking for a specific planet based on the URL that triggered my extension. I'm going to find that URL, I'm going to create an adaptive card and return that back as a result. So let's go ahead and let's spin this up. And while that's loading, let's grab the URL for one of our planets that we haven't looked at yet. So like Jupiter, we haven't looked at Jupiter. So I will grab that. And let's come back over to Microsoft Teams and let's update the app. And once the app is updated, just verify that's version 3, which it is. And now if I go back over to the app, if I paste in a link here, watch what happens. So I paste in the link, and sure enough, it added in a card here for information, a hero card for my messaging, for my message, because it detected that Jupiter was the link that was added. If I add in a different link, so let's add something in that is not the same. So let's remove something that's not a valid link, and I'll paste that in. It will not find Jupiter. But if I put the entire thing in there, remove this, if I put the entire link, it's not finding it that way. Let's do it like this. Jupiter. So I grab the whole thing when I paste it in because that's going to trigger it. There we go. Now it's working. Or if I add in, let's say, Venus. There we go. Then Venus is showing up. So what you've seen in this demo is how you can add link unfurling to your Microsoft Teams app and how to implement this type of messaging extension. Thank you for watching this module. I hope you got a lot out of this and I hope you learned something. This screencast is associated with, has an associated module to go along with it. And that module includes not only slides and demos, but it also includes a hands-on lab that will walk you through all of the steps that we showed here in the demonstration sections of this screencast. So make sure you check out the notes for this video to get access to the module where you'll find more information that you can use to get more about these resources. Thank you very much.